All right, we are taking a look at Where They Fall by Team. Is it Manatee? Is that that's the name?
Technically, it can be either Team Manatee, Manatee, the Mana Team, whatever you like.
Gotcha. Okay, and I'm joined by Hannah and Stefan. Thank you so much for joining me on the call. I just played through the game, and I kind of was bemoaning the fact that my ability to interpret the runes, maybe I am just too much of a literal person. I had a lot of trouble figuring out what I was supposed to do or say. But before we get into any of that, maybe we can, if I can just ask each of you what your background is in game development and what your role on this project was. So, Hannah, if we can start with you.
Uh, all right. Well, I'm Hannah, and I did all most of the art stuff for Where They Fall. I was accompanied by a friend of mine called Florian, and together we did most of the models, the characters, and tweaked some of the story stuff. But the fancy effects, especially the fog, is the work of our colleague Bernie, who is not here with us today. But in case you wanted to get some props out, uh, put them to him.
Absolutely. All right, and Stefan, how about you?
Yeah, hi, I'm Stefan, and I basically did the game design and the story. So I wrote all the dialogue you just read out and designed like the puzzles, like the stones, how they were laid out, the systems behind that, the combinations, and yeah.
All right, nice. So what was the actual inspiration behind the game? I mean, I guess the sort of the core inspiration of like being a seer is pretty straightforward, but in terms of the way that the game actually plays out, like having to make these interpretations and the way that you had the rules laid out, if you can talk a little bit about like what was the brainstorming session that led to the game as we see it now.
Do you want to answer, Stefan, or should I?
You can, sure.
All right.
Go ahead.
Okay. First background. This is a game jam game. In this case, the prompt was roll of the dice, and as you mentioned, the brainstorming session was pretty much what can we do with roll of the dice without putting actual dice in. The thing is, we did a lot of game jams during our university years, also with lots of changing team members. And one of the things we noticed was that often you kind of go with your first gut instinct in a game jam. There's time pressure and you want to get going right ahead, but we thought it would lead to like a lot of games with dice in them in some case, and we wanted to subvert that expectation, to use that catchphrase. So we thought, what is kind of like dice, but not dice exactly? So we came up with like this concept of the dice have fallen, something with fate, and so we ended up with like soothsaying, which in case soothsaying usually is associated with like tarot cards or some sort of other device like pendulums. So we thought, how can we make that more dice-like? So we ended up with cleromancy, which is specifically soothsaying by way of throwing objects. And since we wanted to put like a unique spin on it, we thought like Celtic and Nordic and Germanic mythology would like be a good place to put that. So that's how we ended up with like this central concept of the runestone. And like the mechanics of the board and throwing the runes kind of came from that. Like you have these dice-like objects that you are rolling, but we substituted like the dice with the runestones and the rolling with the throwing. And we kind of moved on from there, building a story around that.
So, what just happened there was tabbed out to adjust the volume, and I tabbed back in and accidentally clicked go for the ambush, and it got me killed. So, um, is there a like actual way to interpret the stones, or is it meant to be more abstract? Or maybe you don't want to say.
Well, in this game jam version, there are rules. So with the book, you
Yes.
can try to interpret them, and there's sort of a logic that I designed for it. Well, at least for the game jam version, right? So it's not like it's a fully fleshed out system. It's more like, okay, what are combinations or stuff that seems logical enough that people will get.
Mhm. So do the stones actually fall the same way each time? Because this
Yes.
looks familiar.
Yes,
Yeah.
they do.
Oh, okay.
It's always smokes and mirrors. I'm sorry.
That's very clever. Yeah, but so is it an animation, or is it like a pre-baked physics like calculation?
Um, all right, so the rune stones and the actual throwing was like the hardest part of making this game. The rune stones are a pre-calculated animation which I baked out in Blender,
Hmm.
but using like real-world physics or using physics
Yeah,
simulation
yeah.
to create that animation. And it was 2 a.m. and I had all the rune stones ready, and Stefan gave me the sheets where the runes were supposed to land, and the simulation kept crashing. So I had to, for 2 hours, throw these rune stones, kind of tweak the direction so they would fall in the right place, then bake out the each rune stone individually, because if I tried to get all 8 right, the program would crash before I could finish it. So I had
Goodness.
to painfully uh, create these animation, which is why there's also only one way the runes can fall. Originally, we wanted to have like some variation for each story scenario, but I just couldn't. I just couldn't finish them in time.
No, that's incredible though. I mean, because it does look like a very realistic. That's why I thought that it wasn't just a like a hand done animation. Like they actually look like they're falling and bouncing at least somewhat realistically. So, did I just kind of stumble my way through the correct answers the first time I played?
Sort of. Well, there is not only one ending. I saw in the chat someone asking
Ah,
if the
okay.
choices not matter. The choices do matter. In this game jam version, there are 2 different endings because we thought it would be interesting to have an ending where it's like you actively decide not to answer with the God's will, but like
Mhm.
go actively against it. So we also prepared another ending for that, or in a bit of
Ah,
variation later, depending on how good you are with if you're good to divine the answers.
gotcha. All right. So, I kind of like went out of order there a bit because I just happened to trigger the game over there. But I think we never yeah, we didn't get as far as um talking about the actual development process of the game. So to the extent that, for each of your roles on the project, if you could talk a little bit about like from the beginning, like did you sort of like sketch things out and then go in with more complete assets afterwards, or were you pretty much just like working on trying to get like the final look in place first and foremost?
Since you started with the visual side, I can talk a little bit about that. So Um, the background of this is that we were working on another project at the time and
Mhm.
kind of did the game jam as like an aside one weekend because we had time, and we were like, why not? Um, that project in particular was very intense on the art, so it had like this very painterly style with mixing 2D and 3D elements, and it was very complicated. So I just went, okay, right now I'm gonna just model everything out, think about the textures later, and then kind of put it together.
Mhm.
Um, so the art style is very much a case of I kind of built this hut and thought I don't feel like texturing everything in it.
Mhm.
So we ended up with like this blackness and everything, uh, which people liken to Inscription. And yeah, that's a game I've played heavily last year and definitely an inspiration. But it's not exactly a copy. It's more like this common theme of if you put black everywhere, you don't have to paint so much.
Oh yeah, of course. I mean, even like old NES games have like black up past the edges of certain tile sets. Like it's a long it's something that has been done plenty of times to achieve a particular aesthetic, but also for the reason you described to not have to paint in every detail.
Totally, because also it doesn't really matter that much for this game. Like
Hmm.
the candles are nice ambience, but they are not paramount to the gameplay. So
Yeah,
making them
absolutely.
too fancy would be distracting, I think.
Yeah, I think it's good to keep the focus. Like I like the way that are the runes using like an emissive material?
Yeah, they do. Like slight emissive,
Yeah.
but not the real light that comes from them.
Okay, yes. Just enough that they appear lit in contrast to everything else.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, I think it provides a really good contrast. Like as much as I'm saying I don't know how to interpret anything, at least I can see what the symbols are. That's very clear. So, and then as for the like development side of things, oh, sorry, unless you had anything else you want to say about the visuals, Hannah, before we move on.
Oh, I'm done for the time being.
Okay. So, Stefan, then.
Yeah, so for the throws and for the story in general, I did a lot of paper prototyping and research first. So like figuring out about the time, like the third to fourth century after Christ. Like what do we know about this period of time, and then also like figuring out, okay, what kind of throws are we able to do with those rune stones, right? What do the
Hmm.
runes actually mean? What meaning do they convey? What concept? For what kind of concept do they stand or do they symbolize? Um, so that took like half of the jam. So like trying it out in game in Unity. But then that was easy because we already knew, okay, the throws are working out. We tested. I could test them on paper. Other people could understand it, and then we just got it into the engine. And but it's like with this kind of game, it's like focusing on story. It was a bit of a gamble, so like everything has to come together and work together to see if this works out for the story.
Hmm. So, did you have like you mentioned that you've got a sort of um, there's the like going against the will of the gods, and there's the like success path. But are there
Mm.
like multiple failure states along the way, or is there um, just sort of like I don't know. I guess I'm just a little curious about like what the Venn diagram of the game, or not, sorry, not the Venn diagram, but the flow chart of the game
The
looks like.
flowchart, yeah.
Yeah.
So I can reveal that much that like in the beginning you have like the first few questions are able to get you into a sort of fail state. So
Hmm.
like it's checking, okay, did you understand in general how the runes work, how rune reading works? But after that, like, I think after the first session, there's like, okay, there's no more fail states, but now it's like branching a bit out. Um, and then it just leads to two distinct different endings. So it's like we have two endings, like a good ending and a you could say it's a bad ending.
I
But
think
then
it's the interesting ending.
and it might be the some people who played it said it's the interesting ending, so yeah. Sorry, I think you might be muted.
I am muted. Oh my gosh. Sorry about that. Thank you for the heads up there in chat I just saw. So all I was trying to say, I'll summarize that real quick. This question in particular seems a little bit like up to interpretation. Sacrifice the enemy soldiers to the gods, send their heads to the enemy, or question them. With this question as an example, could we could we look at the way the runes have fallen here and like is it just up to the player's interpretation, or is there a quote unquote correct answer as you're supposed to interpret from what is on the board here?
So basically, you have to look at the runes meaning in combination with the meanings of the symbols on the board, right? So that's like for each question, there's the sort of interpretation, and you can see like, okay, there's the horses are on alone, and you have this sort of the Fehu rune, which, if you look it up, it stands for wealth and prosperity, but it's also in conflict. So you know, okay, it's more like these runes, they describe a situation or a future situation instead of like just spelling out the answer for you. And so for this question, if you look back at the runes,
yeah, it's a little delayed, but yeah, I've done it.
Yeah. So, yeah, thanks. No. Because it's not clearly stating that in the future you have been like sacrificing them or beheading or sending some sort of warning, which is not stated in these runes. It's like, okay, it's not horse, it's not man. So not like the left part of this board states not man.
Yeah.
And so the idea behind this was like, this means don't kill them, question them, basically.
Right, because I did see the not man, and that's sitting on top of the like black skull symbol, which I interpreted as death. So like not man death seems.
Yeah, so don't kill them. Yeah.
And then there's only one answer that actually corresponded with leaving them alive. So that one is kind of what I went with. The other thing that I was a little unsure of, in the top right hand corner, there's a symbol that looks like a drop of water, but then also right next to it, there's a wave.
Yeah.
So can you...
So about the board, you asked before if it's a Venn diagram. Yes, but also kind of no. The thing is, the four corners represent like elements. You have the moon, the sun in opposing corners, and fire and water in opposing corners.
Okay.
The symbols in between are like combinations of that. Like the moon and water together represent the sea.
Oh, the tides, yeah.
Yeah, so that's the tides.
Okay.
Like sunlight and water together represent life or growth, plants, nature. The other ones are like kind of a stretch, but we had to put death somewhere, so we put it opposite of life. And conflict is like everything together, where all these forces meet.
Okay, yeah, I see. So it's life is the seed, death is opposite it.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, and then I'm not sure why tides are necessarily opposite the heart. It doesn't seem like it's an opposite necessarily, but I guess I can see how warmth, like sun and fire, can be heart, and then because it like water and moon definitely like reads as tides. That makes sense.
So it was a bit of interpretation, like if you have tides against the love, that's like love is more like a stable state of emotion, and like with the tides, it's more like if you are like, you could interpret it as like an arguing or opposing forces, like the idea was like to have a symbol that would represent like the tide of enemies like rushing in, for example. It could also be like an interpretation of the symbol. And it was these symbols or the concepts we came up quickest enough for this first version.
To be fair, this is also kind of my perception of real soothsaying, where you kinda go through synonyms, and if you keep doing that, you kinda arrive at something that seems to make sense eventually.
Yeah, it's a bit more of like a free association, which again, as I was saying, like again, maybe I'm taking things too literally, and that's why I was like, I don't know. There are some things where I felt good. Like this question in particular was the one where I actually felt good about in figuring out the like no man death leading to question them as the answer. But the other ones were a bit more like up in the air. I think there's one question I think that's going to come after this one where they're like, which side do we attack from? Like these ones are pretty easy because we just see the arrow. I think it would have been fun if there was a situation where, and maybe you'd already planned for this, but having the arrow be next to the notice, is that how you say it?
Yeah,
The sign of
notice,
hardship.
yeah.
Notice. That like saying is like, oh, it looks like it's here, but it's actually the opposite, something like that. So right now I just know that the answer is north. But yeah, I mean, when you have a rune that is just a negation thing like that, I don't know if that could tie into the numeric like yes or no questions, but it seems like you could have used it for the directional question. And then I'm not sure, did you have any other ideas with that one?
Do you mean especially this inversion concept, or?
Yeah, like I guess did you have any other ideas of using? Let's make it a little more broad. So the inversion rune, but then also like, were there any other ideas you had for combinations of runes, and ways that could like influence what the player is interpreting that maybe didn't make it into this version of the game?
Well, we had a few ideas like concerning relations actually between stones. Like you have a rune that like symbolizes causality between two runes. Like this one thing leads to another thing, which could maybe also be again inverse. Like if you have also this relation and the nowadays rune, or the rune standing for inversion, then you have like an inversed relation.
Okay.
But due to the time and also like to test and to make not make it too over complicated, because we already have seen like in this version as it is right now, it's like complicated enough to figure it out, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, does it like if you were to sit down, would you say that there is like a logical way to puzzle through every question in the game, or are some of them like maybe a bit abstract? You need to kind of think about things at a different perspective.
Now from a retrospective and having seen few people play the game and like giving us feedback, some of the questions may be too hard. Maybe difficult. That's like always an issue with game jams. Like how do you balance such a game? How do you balance puzzles, right? For some people it's too easy, for others it's too hard. If we would sit down and like reiterate on this version of the game, we would like also rework a few of the throws, like make them more clear with their meanings.
I played it like on the Sunday right before we had to turn it in, and I was struggling. It definitely is on the harder side in terms of puzzle games, because it's so much all at once.
Yeah, we didn't have time like to make a proper tutorial, for example, right? You're just thrown into the game and you have like the full book and have to figure everything out by yourself. That would probably have helped to better get into the game.
Also, Lurk Not Lie was asking if these are the actual meanings of the runes or if you modified them for the sake of the game.
The rune symbols are the actual ones from the Elder Futhark. But it's not all of them. It's like we did a selection of them.
Right. Yeah.
Trying to stay true to the core concepts of what they symbolize, but we did took a few creative freedoms. So we liberties and our own interpretations of what like different people at different times tried to interpret them. Like in the late Viking times, people had different interpretations, and the medieval ages they had others, and like we took from everywhere, like which sounded interesting. And like there's, for example, there's different runes that like stand for a certain type of tree. So we thought like, okay, we don't need 3 runes that basically symbolize the tree. So we thought about, okay, what does this sort of rune like symbolize, or do we even need those runes, right? Like we said, like with I have to look at the runes for this, but with the harvest rune, for example, we also did like with the interpretation of years. So basically, it's only harvest, but the rune Jera, it also can stand for seasons or years. But those are different interpretations people did over the years, right? So we try to be accurate, but where it would make things too complicated, we took our creative freedoms, liberties.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right. And then when you were working on the game, I know it's been a couple months since the GMTK Jam, but do you happen to remember, like, what was the most difficult problem you encountered during the jam, and how did you solve it? Hannah, it sounds like it might have been the blender crashing on you, but was there something else?
Blocking in that answer.
Okay.
I cannot talk or speak too much towards the programming side because most of that is Bernie's work.
Yeah.
I do remember we had like some troubles with scene loading, especially the HTML5 build, which is something we never did before. Took a lot of time and nerve. But I couldn't go into technical details regarding that. Basically, it didn't work. Bernie was stressed out for a while, and then it solved itself.
Okay.
Yeah, so we didn't have that web version for the voting phase, but then we delivered that after the voting phase had ended, and like we could start uploading builds again. We also did like a post-jam version where we fixed a few bugs and also like reworked a bit of the throws. So this is like the version.
Yeah, that is what I'm playing right now.
Yes.
Yeah, and then Stefan, for your side, what do you think was the most difficult problem that you encountered, and how did you solve it?
I think that the difficult part, but how do I say it? The story wasn't actually the difficult part. That was rather easy to get into. Right, we quickly had this sort of setting with the Germanic tribes and the Romans coming, right? So that sort of fell together. Like designing the actual throws in combination with this symbol board with the table and everything, and to make sure that most of the people have just the possibility to get it, like to actually get the answer. It's something I was really struggling with. Also, I did not have so much time over the weekend, so it was like sitting down and like designing it and making sure it works, and then like, can I express the fitting answers with only those few runes we selected now? So it was at some point we had to pin down, all right, we only can use these runes because we couldn't use 24 rune stones. That would have been way too much. Like Hannah may have collapsed from simulating that. So like limiting yourself to that and then making sure that this works. And lots of testing on the last day. Like, yeah, I would say that was the greatest challenge from game design.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I guess at that point, then, do you have any plans for the game going forward?
I'm glad you asked. Actually, right now we are developing like a second prototype of the game
Mhm.
because it's something we would like to pursue further. Um, right now it's in a state where it's coming together. We have like a story planned out, which is great because now we know like characters, locations, and roughly how much content there will be. And I'm working towards finishing art assets that we can put in like a publisher pitch
Mhm.
because we would really like this time to have a publisher at the side just for financing, PR, marketing, because we already released the game and thought that our team lacked like the ability to properly market a game like that.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, we we could really use some help with that. And we are currently working to get it.
Yeah,
Also
I
with
think.
like the response we got from people, like so many people played it and liked it. We got in the final video from the GMTK jam, right? And many people were like really excited about playing as they were like, oh, we haven't seen something like this sort of fortune telling. Where you take the role of the fortune teller, right? So many games do this, like you have a person sitting there and reading you some sort of prophecy, but you never
Mhm.
play them. So yeah, like Hannah mentioned, actually fleshing out a story besides, oh, there are Romans coming and attacking us, but there will be way more if we actually manage to make the full game. We redesigned like the basic system of how runes work,
Mhm.
and like we for now at least, like we ditched the board, for example. So we saw like, okay, it's too complicated to combine the runes with the symbols on the board, so we removed this for now, and we are
Mhm.
more we are for now we are understanding runes more like a language. So we want to
Okay.
like have players figure out it's that the runes are more like a hidden language, like the sort of language the gods are communicating with us. And
Mhm.
like with every language where you start out learning it, you don't know anything. You have to start with simple words, simple phrases, and work your way up. That's like a concept we are currently like pursuing to develop. Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting. So is the idea going to be that as runes like land near each other, they form concepts by their combination, or is it more like each rune on its own stands for a concept? Like, how are you thinking of building up this language?
So what we're thinking is that you have several types of runes. That you have like runes that represent concepts, like a basic concept for sun, like we have, for example, as a symbol on the board right now.
Yeah.
But also like you have a rune that stands for war or conflict. But it represents a broader concept with one or several specific interpretations. But also like runes, as I mentioned before, with the relations that like give a combination of runes more meaning than, okay, it's something combined of these two concepts. It's more like, okay, there can be a causality, there can be a time relation or a location relation. Um, so we are looking into making it more interesting. Besides, like, okay, there's this combined or compound meaning. What can we borrow from the logic of languages and design puzzles around that to make them more interesting, but
Mhm.
not make them too complicated to understand.
Yeah, this is also why Stefan struggled a bit earlier to explain the literal meaning of that one board you showed us, because in our current iteration it doesn't work like that anymore. And like thinking back to what the Game Jam prototype is a bit hard because you have all
Yeah.
these rules now in your head that you want to follow, but those are not the rules the Game Jam version goes by. Uh, so there's some drastic changes
Yeah.
in the way the runes work.
And lot of it is based on the feedback we got from people. So like people mentioning like, oh, this is the part we love. We love the people love the setting, the aesthetic. They love the soundtrack, which also one of our colleagues did for the game. Also, props to him for that, for this Celtic Germanic soundtrack you've been hearing.
Hello, Phil.
Think he's in the chat, yes.
Of course, yes.
Of course. But also like yeah, like working actually with the feedback we got from people, and then look with fresh eyes on the mechanics and the game and see, okay, what do we need to remove? And we were like, okay, let's remove most of the stuff we thought would be established and like reduce it to the core that people actually loved, what they were excited about, and then rebuild the game basically on top of that. Like, okay, what do we actually need to craft this experience basically?
Yeah, so I just went through another one of the questions there, and I thought like, oh yeah, just go ahead and lead the ambush yourself. That actually worked. So I guess that's not a like failure condition to pick that.
No. At this point, there's not a fail state. So at this point you can't fail anymore. You just go to basically two ways in this game jam version, like the good ending or the other ending.
Okay. So there are multiple like failure points where you can like give deliberately wrong answers, but
yeah,
at this point everything else is just kind of it'll work out.
Yeah, in the beginning it leads to a fail state directly, and in later questions it's more like we track your answers and then decide to which ending we will lead you. So
yeah, all right. So I was just thinking about the sort of like the revamped version of the game, and I think that if you're looking to find a publisher for that, I think that's a really good idea, just because I've definitely had my own struggles in terms of trying to get a game promoted. I'm certain that the good reception it got from the GNTK Jam will help you secure the publisher in the first place, but I guess the best thing about a publisher is that they can help you connect the game to the audience, at least if they have a PR department that knows what they're doing. But how long of an experience do you imagine crafting for the completed game? Because it seems like you'd need to add in potentially a few more like mechanics and combinations and scenarios. Is there... Well, I don't know. Do you want to get into that a little bit right now?
So, from a story perspective, we thought we would like flesh out the world and the characters, also multiple characters this time a bit more. Like working from that base, you are here in a Germanic village. And but also like elaborating on concepts we had in the Game Jam version. Like you still have the rune reading, but it's expanded now. You still have like this basic game loop of it's kind of like a visual novel, but also with puzzles, where you have like this flowchart you can follow. And we wanted to flesh out that flowchart where you can end up in multiple situations, more endings, more in-depth story arcs.
Secrets.
Also secrets, and perhaps some location changes where you're in other situations where someone else is talking to you. So all in all, like really mostly an expanded version of what is already there, with better production values, a little less, well, a little bit better difficulty curve, and yeah, just going from there. It's also rather early, so we are thinking we're going to develop this game for roughly a year if we were to start right now. So of course things can change, and there are some details we haven't fleshed out quite yet. But we are confident that in due time we will have a bit better, a good overview of what's going to come.
Yeah, absolutely. 'Cause I do think that a game like this benefits more from a like being more of a like visual novel type experience than a strict puzzle one. And not to say that you can't have a puzzle in here. And I think that maybe one of the more interesting aspects of like the practice of soothsaying is the idea of like twisting things and giving double meaning advice such that you're kind of setting yourself up to sound correct no matter what you say. I think there's a lot of room to explore concepts like that, but leaning
Totally.
yeah, like leaning more into a like a branching narrative where there are more than one, where there is more than one correct choice, I think is interesting. And you know, maybe if you get some things objectively wrong, then it's not an immediate failure state, but it just kind of sets you down one path where you really have to make up for it and, you know, do your best to make up some excuses as to why, like, maybe you have to question and it's like, oh well, I said to do this. Did you do this? And it's like, oh, I mean, we kind of did. It's like, see, if you'd followed my advice properly, then we wouldn't be in this situation. So I can imagine some situations where you have to cover for yourself also being like working into the plot somehow. But yeah, I think
Absolutely.
that's a good way to
Yeah,
take it.
I mean, the interesting thing with prophecies, divinations, and all this sort of stuff is most of the times it can be read in more than one way, especially from the audience. Like with the classic, like this Oracle of Delphi, a situation where it says a prophecy, but you only know what it meant with the prophecy only when it actually happened, right? So to have these situations where you need to give an answer, you have like this throw, but it could be several answers, and then you don't only need like the knowledge about how the game works, but also like about the narrative, right? So if I choose this, where does this lead me? So like how to figure out how the flowchart is structured, like as a player, right? So where will this lead me to like explore a bit if I do this stuff a bit differently? What will happen? This is something we would like to have certainly in a full version of this game. Yes.
Yeah, sounds
Also,
good.
of course, there's this part of soothsaying where sometimes, even if you were to see the future and the gods were totally honest with you, the answer you give might not be popular with whoever's asking. In the position of the seer, you are kind of the decider of the fate of the village and its people. And we wanted to play in our expanded story with that concept where you might be a very faithful seer, but that might not actually be that popular with the people if you tell them their families are going to die and there's no hope. But also, like earlier in your playthrough, you said you were just like this is good tactical advice. So we also wanted to have like this dimension where you might be able to decide that for now it might be better to go with like better tactical advice, which a soothsayer wouldn't tell you whether or not what they have saw, what they saw was actually what they told you. Which kind of plays into this narrative dimension. Like the runes still give answers towards like how to resolve the conflict, but you are not forced to follow their lead.
For example, maybe there could be a question in the throw that would predict, like you as a seer dying. Like that, the answer the correct answer you would give in the situation would lead to your demise. Like you would see your own death. Would you still give that answer? Like most people, like would be human not to basically give an answer would kill yourself, right?
Right.
So you choose another answer that will deviate from the path like what the gods have intended, and now you have to see where this leads the village. Maybe you survive for now, and then something differently happens, or maybe the character you're talking to will survive or not survive. Like that, you choose differently in this situation that will have a major impact on how the story develops.
Yeah, there's a couple things I kind of like there. First of all, maybe the idea that you have multiple books and sometimes you are relying on the will of the gods, but maybe it's ambiguous and you need to rely on your actual like practiced understanding, like to give accurate like agricultural advice or military advice or just like drawing on actual sources of information that, again, you hope you're correct in your interpretation.
Yes.
But using that to kind of supplement the advice, like thinking about, okay, maybe this is the objectively correct answer according to my own studies, but the gods say that is expressly not the thing to do. And I think playing with that, like understanding, sometimes being able to rely on the gods and seeing them directly give advice that seems contrary to what you see as the written word, and then other times having to see that, well, the will of the gods here is just kind of ambiguous, and I think I should just fall back on giving generally good advice. Sort of playing with that could be an interesting way, especially if there is no direct and immediate fail condition, if there is a bit like of breathing room.
Okay, so
Yeah, go on.
absolutely good points. I'm kind of nervous about like spoiling too much.
Okay.
Because
let's just say
we
that's
had
all
long
conjecture
story
for now.
discussions, and
Yeah.
I don't want to tell too much right
That's
now.
fine. That's fine. Let's say that's all conjecture on my part. I wanted to say it because I thought it would be interesting, and I think the most interesting thing is the implementation. So you don't have to confirm or deny what any of this. I couldn't help but say it because I wanted to mention that. And then otherwise, we've got an incoming raid from Icy Lava and also Lenky. Hello. But yeah, so we do need to wrap things up kind of shortly. So between now and then, I do hope that I wish you the best of luck on developing your prototype and finding a publisher.
Thank you.
Because I think there absolutely is a way to take what's here and expand on it. Yeah, and is there anything else, any other projects that you want to mention or social media channels you want to plug before we wrap things up?
So right now, I think I sent you some screenshots of our current version.
Oh yes, I'll pull that up.
If you can pull them up on the screen.
Ooh,
Just to give an
fancy,
idea
fancy.
what it possibly could look like in the
Yes.
future, especially with the difference, you have the game jam version and what it looks like now. It's
Yes, I'll pull these up one at a time here. Very fancy.
So this is our current version. It's still not quite yet ready to be played by the public, but we wanted to throw out there if there's anyone interested in like helping us play testing and like giving us feedback on certain mechanics or the story or what's to come. we have a Discord now. That would be, if Stefan, you could pull up the social medias.
Oh yes, and feel free
Yeah,
to drop
sure,
a link
sure.
in the chat, and we can also you can share it on the on my Discord as well.
Yeah, I'll drop it in the chat.
So it looks like you've got a couple different like color treatments of the same scene. Is that the idea?
Yes. So this kind of plays into the rune rework that we mentioned earlier. So basically, we de-emphasized the book because it led to like you start reading the book and there's all these rules all at once. So we wanted to kind of have an experience where you gradually unlock new meanings, which you right now do by way of throwing some salt into the fire that's not right there right now, but is below the table. So you throw some salt in there. There's some fog that comes out of it, and that will allow you to focus on a rune and divine a new meaning for that rune. So you gradually like unlock these runes and their concepts. So you end up with like the information of the book in the game jam version over time.
So it's not overwhelming you all at the same time in the beginning.
Yeah. No, I think that's a good call. Absolutely. All right. So any other particular like social media channels or anything that you'd like to drop in the chat before we wrap things up?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I just dropped the Discord link, so if anyone's interested in seeing where this game might lead, you can totally join there and help us testing the game and talk about stuff. Also, for any updates, you can follow us on Twitter. I will just also share this. That's like the main social media site where we post stuff when we post stuff.
Gotcha.
And also maybe I can share our last project we released. That was a 2D platformer called Q, a neon platformer, which released in 2020. That's like a really tough as nails platformer that we did. Yeah, there's also an older demo version on itch.io, and the full version is on Steam if anyone might be interested in checking that out.
I think the one last thing I'll recommend is maybe include your Discord link somewhere on the itch.io page itself.
Yes, we will.
So we will update the itch.io page shortly. We were kind of rushing to finish the prototype footage for today.
Okay.
So over the coming years, but promise before Halloween, we are going to put a link there with some news regarding the project.
All right, fantastic. Well, thank you both so much for coming on. Hannah, Stefan, I think this, I do see a lot of promise in this premise, like especially when you started talking about it being a bit more of like a visual novel branching narrative kind of way. I think it's going to a lot of interesting potential for sure. So thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me about it. And if there is a version of the game that you are ready to actually share, I'd be more than happy to talk through it, look at it on the stream. Obviously, try to spoil as little bit as possible, but we'll see. We'll see if we can find something that works. But yeah, thank you so much again for coming on, and I wish you the best of luck in the continued development.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Have a nice day.
Bye for now. Thank you.
Bye-bye.